Okay, first I'm going to talk in my presentation today about the local water supply development by water agencies. And when I say water agencies, I mean the Water Authority and our member agencies. We are a wholesale agency and we have 24 member agencies, so a lot of the local water supply development is also being done by those member agencies. And then I wanted to talk about the contribution of customers to our water supply portfolio through water conservation and some things that are coming up on graywater and rainwater capture. And I have the diversification charts too that Director Hogan described to you, a little bit different spin on it. I also wanted to point out in the hashed portion of the charts, that's the portion of our water supply that's coming from a combination of recycled water use and water conservation. And all of the water that's coming to us from Imperial County is conserved water. It's from on-farm conservation as well as conservation and canal lining. So when you combine that with our local recycled water, local conservation, by 2020, over 50% of our water supply in San Diego will be conserved water. Some of the drivers for our local water supply development, why are we doing it? When you look at the imported water costs, and I'd say all of our member agencies are doing this calculation and they're saying, how much is it going to cost? How much is my project? And the imported water cost line and the new water supply development locally line are going to cross in the next 10 years or so. So it is a very good approach, besides the reliability aspect, but just from a financial perspective to develop these local supplies. We also have a lot of advancement in technologies, particularly membrane technologies, and then the local supplies really give us a lot more control over our water supply. One other aspect that's pretty important to it, and I call it regulatory feasibility, and if every one of these projects is subject to regulations, and that has a huge impact on the cost and the ability to do the project. And so having reasonable regulations that help us develop supplies and still protect the environment and public health is very important. So how much local supplies are we developing? By 2020, we expect that 23% of our region's water supply will be local water supplies, and this includes groundwater, recycled water, seawater desalination, and indirect potable reuse. So I'm going to talk primarily about groundwater and recycled water, and then following me, Kathy will talk about the IPR, and Bob's going to talk about the seawater desalination. So on our recycled water, we've done quite a bit of recycled water in San Diego County. Right now we recycle 28,000 acre feet a year, and in our urban water management plan we expect that to grow to 44,000 acre feet a year. And I will point out this is primarily pretty much 100% non-potable use of recycled water, and doesn't really account for some of the indirect potable reuse that's being looked at right now. We have some very high-profile customers in San Diego County that use recycled water. The Flower Fields in Carlsbad, Santee Lakes was the first in the state to recycle water, and even Torrey Pines Golf Course is using recycled water. So we also have a real strong support from our business community here in San Diego. We work with the Industrial Environmental Association pretty closely, and they are very interested in using recycled water. I'd say the primary use that we have at our local businesses is for cooling towers. And sometimes it's a bit of a hassle because of the quality of the water is a little bit harder to deal with, but they've been willing to take that effort and use recycled water here. We always, in our recycled water use, ensure protection of public health. For the non-potable reuse, we have filtered and disinfected wastewater, and it really takes a lot of effort to make sure that that dual piping system doesn't get cross-connected, and so our member agencies spend a lot of time out there making sure that doesn't happen. And then on if we go to potable reuse, it's a much, much higher level of treatment than what we have for our non-potable reuse, and Kathy's going to get into that in her presentation. For the future, what do we kind of see coming our way with recycled water use? In our urban water management plan, we do have a plan to continue our non-potable use and continue to expand that. But when you look at, if you want to do significant quantities of recycled water in San Diego County, we're not going to be able to get there through non-potable reuse just because of this economies of scale. And we've hit a lot of our big customers already, and as we continue out with the distribution system, you start going after smaller and smaller customers, and it becomes a little bit more less cost effective. And so what we're seeing is a real strong interest in moving towards potable reuse because you can do it on a larger scale. And I would say we're seeing that not just in San Diego County, but we're seeing that interest statewide in California. And this, in 2010, there was some legislation passed. It's called SB 918, and that requires the state health department to adopt regulations for groundwater recharge and reservoir augmentation with recycled water. And it also asks them to look at, can we go to direct potable reuse with this very highly treated water where we can put it directly into our raw water pipelines without having an intervening groundwater basin or reservoir. So that's a lot of work's going to be done in that area in the next few years, so we'll see where that heads. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is groundwater. I'd like to point out the picture on the right-hand side there, and you can see our groundwater basins in San Diego County, and they are really small. When you look at statewide at the groundwater, you go up to LA, we have pretty small groundwater basins, but we still are able to get 20,000 acre feet a year out of those basins, and we do have plans to go to 27,000 acre feet a year by 2020. Some of our groundwater basins are high in total dissolved solids, and so they require reverse osmosis treatment to remove those salts. And so most of any project going forward, and we do have some very successful projects in San Diego County, but it requires that level of treatment. And so we do use it to the extent that we can. A little bit about the cost of the next increment of supply. And these numbers are our best numbers today. I will point out as projects move along in their development, we get more refined numbers for their projects, but most of our new water supplies are running in about the $2,000 an acre foot level. So that's about, and it's pretty comparable across the different types of projects. One thing I would like to point out is if there is a second benefit from that project, it can do a lot to make it more cost effective. Example of that is if the city of San Diego goes to IPR, they get a benefit of less cost on wastewater treatment at the Point Loma plant because it offloads it. And so that brings it into a much more cost-effective range.